Welcome to the Scriptures, Histories, and Companions of the First Nazarene. We will uncover the long-hidden ancient books, and we will read them. We will discover the intimate stories of our ancestors, the Nazarenes, and we will recount them. And those brave souls who established our faith, people like the brothers and sisters of our Savior, we will name them, many for the very first time, and they will be strangers no more. This is your host, Jackson Snyder of the Netzari Yahadim. For more information about the First Nazarene, join us at theyahad.org, THEYAHAD.org. Until then, we hope you will enjoy each broadcast of the First Nazarene. Hello, my friends, and welcome again to Jackson Snyder Presents, produced by the Vero Essin Yahad, a Hebrew Nation Radio original. And I have a real treat for you today. I'm coming out with a new audio book in which I'll be reading the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles. This is my translation of the Epitomes of Clement, also known as the Clementine Recognitions, a different Acts of the Apostles, as ancient as the one that's in the Bible, but from a different perspective, that of Kefa, or Peter, rather than the perspective of Paul. If you're not familiar with this manuscript, you are about to be, because the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles contains 10 books, and I have today audio excerpts of the first 2 books, and I expect to have all 10 books in audio by the end of May 2019, which I will make available to you, if you please. The contents of which is the journal of Clement of Rome, Flavius Clemens, his assignment from James the Just to become the secretary of Peter, and to write down in books all that Peter says and does on his road from Jerusalem to Rome, and to submit these books to James so he can put them in the archives in Jerusalem. Unfortunately, these books have not come out of the archives, except in weak, churchy translations for the last 1,500 years. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles is now rescued, retranslated in Hebraic format. I published the book in 2007, updated in 2013, and this book has gone around the world. It has changed many lives and many minds, because within these books, we uncover many new concepts, new to us, but old to the apostles, those which they knew, those which they followed, and the original teachings of Yeshua HaMashiach. So let's begin with this sample at the beginning, in which Clement hears the preaching of Barnabas in Rome and decides to follow him back to Israel to get his assignment as a new disciple, though as a Gentile he is not in the circle until he spends time learning the discipline, repenting of his sins, fasting, and then being baptized and brought into the community of faith. Fasten your seatbelts. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, sample. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, Book 1, Chapter 1, Clement's Early History, Doubts. I, Clement, who was born in the city of Rome, was from my earliest age a lover of chastity, while the bent of my mind held me bound as with chains of anxiety and sorrow, for a thought that was in me, whence originating I cannot tell, constantly led me to think of my condition of mortality, and to discuss such questions as these: whether there be for me any life after death, or whether I am to be wholly annihilated, whether I did not exist before I was born, and whether there will be no remembrance of this life after death, and so the boundlessness of time will consign all things to oblivion and silence, so that not only will we cease to be, but there will be no remembrance that we have ever been. This also I revolved in my mind, when the world was made, or what was before it was made, or whether it had existed from eternity. For it seems certain that if it had been made, it must be doomed to dissolution. And if it be dissolved, what is to be afterward? Unless it may be that all things will be buried in oblivion and silence, or something will be which the mind of man cannot now conceive. Chapter 2. His distress. While I was continually revolving in my mind these and such like questions, suggested I know not how, I was pining away wonderfully through excess of grief, and what was worse, if at any time I thought to cast aside such cares, as being of little use, the waves of anxiety rose all the higher upon me. For I had in me the most excellent companion, who would not suffer me to rest, that is, the desire of immortality. For, as the subsequent issue showed, and the favor of the Almighty Yahweh directed, this bent of mind led me to a quest for truth, and the acknowledgment of the true light, and hence it came to pass that ere long I pitied those who formerly in my ignorance I believed to be blessed. Chapter 3. His dissatisfaction with the schools of philosophers. Having therefore such a bent of mind from my earliest years, the desire of learning something led me to frequent the schools of the philosophers. There I saw that naught else was done, save that doctrines were asserted and controverted without end, contests were waged, and the arts of syllogisms and the subtleties of conclusions were discussed. If at any time the doctrine of the immortality of the spirit prevailed, I was thankful. If at any time it was impugned, I went away sorrowful. Still, neither doctrine had the power of truth over my heart. This only I understood, that opinions and definitions of things were accounted true or false, not in accordance with their nature and the truth of the arguments, but in proportion to the talents of those who supported them. And I was all the more tortured in the bottom of my heart, because I was neither able to lay hold of any of those things that were spoken as firmly established, nor was I able to lay aside the desire of inquiry. But the more I endeavored to neglect and despise them, so much the more eagerly, as I have said, did a desire of this sort, creeping in upon me secretly as with a kind of pleasure, take possession of my heart and mind. Chapter 4. His increasing disquiet. Being therefore distressed in the discovery of things, I said to myself, why do we labor in vain, since the end of things is manifest? For if after death I will be no more, my present torture is useless. But if there is to be for me a life after death, let us keep for that life the excitements that belong to it, lest it be that some sadder thing befall me than those things that I now suffer, unless I will have lived obediently and soberly, and according to the opinions of some of the philosophers, I be consigned to the stream of dark rolling Phlegethon, or to Tartarus, like Sisyphus and Titius, and to the ageless punishment in the infernal regions, like Ixion and Tantalus. And again I would answer myself, but these things are fables. Or if it be so, since the matter is in doubt, it's better to live obediently. But again I would ponder with myself, how should I restrain myself from the lust of sin, while uncertain as to the reward of righteousness? And all the more when I have no certainty what righteousness is, or what is pleasing to Yahweh, and when I cannot ascertain whether the spirit be immortal, and be such that it has anything to hope for, nor do I know what the future is certainly to be. Yet still I cannot rest from the thoughts of this sort. Chapter 5. His design to test the immortality of the spirit. What then will I do? This I will do. I will proceed to Egypt, and there I will cultivate the friendship of the Hierophants, or Navaim, who preside at the shrines. I will win over a magician by money, and entreat him, by what they call the necromantic art, to bring me a spirit from the infernal regions, as if I were desirous of consulting it about some business. But this will be my consultation, whether the spirit is immortal. Now, the proof that the Spirit is immortal will be put past doubt, not from what it says or from what I hear, but from what I see. For seeing it with my eyes, I will ever after hold the surest conviction of its immortality, and no fallacy of words or uncertainty of hearing will ever be able to disturb the persuasion produced by sight. However, I related this project to a certain philosopher with whom I was intimate, who counseled me not to venture upon it, for, said he, if the Spirit should not obey the call of the magician, you henceforth will live more hopelessly, as thinking that there is nothing after death, and also as having tried things unlawful. If, however, you seem to see anything, what obedience or what piety can arise to you from things unlawful and illicit? For they say that transactions of this sort are hateful to the Almighty, and that Elohim sets himself in opposition to those who trouble spirits after their release from the body. And when I heard this, I was indeed staggered in my purpose, yet I could not in any way either lay aside my longing or cast off the distressing thought. Chapter 6. He hears of Moshiach. Not to make a long story of it, while I was tossed upon these billows of my thought, a certain report, which took its rise in the regions of the east in the reign of Tiberius Caesar, gradually reached us, and gaining strength as it passed through every place, like some good message sent from Yahweh. It was filling the whole world, and suffered not the divine will to be concealed in silence, for it was spread all over places, announcing that there was a certain person in Judea, who, beginning in the springtime, was preaching the Malkuth of Yahweh to the Yahudaim, and saying that those should receive it who should observe the ordinances of his commandments and his doctrine, and that his speech might be believed to be worthy of credit, and full of the Almighty. He was said to perform many mighty works and wonderful signs and prodigies by his mere words, so that, as one having power from Yahweh, he made the deaf to hear, and the blind to see, and the lame to stand erect, and expelled every infirmity and all demons from men, yea, that he even raised dead persons who were brought to him, that he cured lepers also, looking at them from a distance, and there was absolutely nothing that seemed impossible to him. These and such like things were confirmed in process of time, not now by frequent rumors, but by the plain statements of persons coming from those quarters. And day by day, the truth of the matter was further disclosed. Chapter 7. Arrival of Yosef bar Nava at Rome. At length, meetings began to be held in various places in the city, and this subject to be discussed in conversation, and to be a matter of wonder who this might be, who had appeared, and what message he had brought from Yahweh to men, until, about the same year, a certain man, standing in a most crowded place in the city, made proclamation to the people, saying, Hear me, O you citizens of Rome! The Son of Yahweh is now in the regions of Judea, promising ageless life to everyone who will hear him, but upon condition that he will regulate his actions according to the will of him by whom he is sent, even of Yahweh the Father. So turn from evil things to good, from things temporal to things ageless. Acknowledge that there is one El, ruler of the heaven and earth, in whose righteous sight the unrighteous inhabit his world. But if you be converted and act according to his will, then coming to the world to come and being made immortal, you will enjoy his unspeakable blessings and rewards. Now the man who spoke these things to the people was from the regions of the east, by tribe a Hebrew, by name Yosef bar Nava, who said that he himself was one of his Talmudim, and that he was sent for this end, that he should declare these things to those who would hear them. When I heard these things, I began with the rest of the multitude to follow him, and to hear what he had to say. Truly, I perceived that there was nothing of dialectic artifice in this man, but that he expounded with simplicity, and without any craft of speech, such things as he had heard from the Son of Yahweh, or had seen. For he did not confirm his assertions by the force of arguments, but produced from the people who stood around about him many witnesses of the sayings and marvels that he related. Chapter 8, his preaching. Now, inasmuch as the people began to assent willingly to the things that were sincerely spoken, and to embrace his simple discourse, those who thought themselves learned or philosophic began to laugh at the man, and to flout him, and to throw out for him the grappling hooks of syllogisms like strong arms. But he, unterrified, regarding their subtleties as mere ravings, did not even judge them worthy of an answer, but boldly pursued the subject that he had set before him. At length, someone having proposed this question to him as he was speaking, "Why, a gnat has been so formed that though it is a small creature, it has 6 feet, and yet it has got wings in addition, whereas an elephant, though it is an immense animal and has no wings, yet has only 4 feet. He, paying no attention to the question, went on with his discourse, which had been interrupted by the unseasonable challenge, only adding this admonition at every interruption.
We have it in charge to declare to you the words and the wondrous works of him who has sent us, and to confirm the truth of what we speak, not by artfully devised arguments, but by witnesses produced from among yourselves. For I recognize many standing in the midst of you whom I remember to have heard along with us the things that we have heard, and to have seen what we have seen. But in your option to receive or to spurn the tidings that we bring to you, for we cannot keep back what we know to be for your advantage, because if we be silent, woe is to you. But to you, if you receive not what we speak, destruction. I could indeed very easily answer your foolish challenges, if you ask for the sake of learning truth. I mean, as to the difference of a gnat and an elephant. But now it were absurd to speak to you of these creatures, when the very Creator and Framer of all things is unknown to you.
Chapter 9. Clement's interposition on behalf of Yosef bar Nava. And when he had thus spoken, all, as if with one consent, with rude voice raised a shout of derision to put him to shame and to silence him, crying out that he was a barbarian and a madman. When I saw matters going on in this way, being filled I know not whence with a certain zeal and inflamed with fervent enthusiasm, I could not keep silent, but cried out with all boldness, "Most righteously does Almighty Yahweh hide his will from you, whom he foresaw to be unworthy of this knowledge of himself, as is manifest to those who are really wise, from what you are now doing. For when you see the preachers of the will of Yahweh have come amongst you, because their speech makes no show of knowledge of the grammatical art, but in simple and unpolished language set before you the divine commands, so that all who hear may be able to follow and to understand the things that are spoken, you deride the ministers and messengers of your salvation, not knowing that it is the condemnation of you who think yourselves skillful and eloquent, that rustic and barbarous men have the knowledge of the truth, whereas when it has come to you, it is not even received as a guest. While if your intemperance and lust do not oppose, it ought to have been a citizen and a native. Thus you're convicted of not having havarim of truth and philosophers, but following of boasting and vain speakers. You think that truth dwells not in simple, but in ingenious and subtle words, and produce countless thousands of words that are not to be rated at the worth of one word. What then do you think will become of you, you crowd of Greeks? Is there to be, as he says, a judgment by Yahweh? And now give over laughing at this man to your own destruction. And let any one of you who pleases answer me, for indeed, by your barking you annoy the ears even of those who desire to be saved, and by your clamor you turn aside to the fall of infidelity the minds that are prepared for faith. What pardon can there be for you who deride and do violence to the messenger of the truth, when he offers to you the knowledge of Yahweh? Whereas, even if he brought you nothing of truth, yet even for the kindness of his intentions toward you, you ought to receive him with gratitude and welcome. Chapter 10. Discourse with Yosef bar Nava. While I was urging these and similar arguments, a great excitement was stirred up among the bystanders. Some being moved with pity as toward a stranger, and approving my speech as in accordance with that feeling, others petulant and stolid, rousing the anger of their undisciplined minds as much against me as against Yosef Barnabas. But as the day was declining to evening, I laid hold of Yosef Barnabas by the right hand and led him away, although reluctantly, to my house. And there I made him remain, lest perchance any one of the rude rabble should lay hands upon him. While we were thus placed in contact for a few days, I gladly heard him discoursing the word of truth. Yet he hastened his departure, saying that he must by all means celebrate at Judea a feast of Yahweh that was approaching, and that there he should remain in future with his countrymen and his brothers, evidently indicating that he was horrified at the wrong that had been done to him. Now let us skip over many chapters and go to the dispute between Clement, Caiaphas, and Peter. And at the end of this section is the lost text, the ascents of James, in which James and his disciples are harassed by who he calls my enemy, beaten and thrown down the temple steps. We're talking about the brother of Yeshua here, Yaakov, James the Just, assaulted. Perhaps you've heard about this passage, and now you're going to hear it, and I want you to guess who the man is who is called my enemy. The Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, chapter 61, Caiaphas answered. Then Caiaphas attempted to impugn the doctrine of Yeshua, saying that he spoke vain things. For he said that the poor are blessed, and promised earthly rewards, and placed the chief gift in an earthly inheritance, and promised that those who maintain righteousness will be satisfied with meat and drink, and many things of this sort he is charged with teaching. Toma, in reply, proves that his accusation is frivolous, showing that the Nevi'im, in whom Caiaphas believes, taught these things much more, and did not show in what manner these things are to be, or how they are to be understood, whereas Yeshua pointed out how they are to be taken. And when he had spoken these things, and others of like kind, Toma also held his shalom. Chapter 62, Foolishness of Preaching. Therefore Caiaphas, again looking at me, and sometimes in the way of warning and sometimes in that of accusation, said that I ought for future to refrain from preaching Moshiach Yahshua, lest I should do it to my own destruction, and lest, being deceived myself, I should also deceive others. Then, moreover, he charged me with presumption, because though I was unlearned, a fisherman, and a rustic, I dared to assume the office of a teacher. And he spoke these things and many more of like kind. I said in reply that I incurred less danger if, as he said, this Yeshua were not the Mashiach, because I received him as a teacher of Torah, but that he was in terrible danger if this be the very Mashiach, as assuredly he is. For I believe in him who has appeared, but for whom else, who has never appeared, does he reserve his faith? But if I, an unlearned and uneducated man, as you say, a fisherman and a rustic, have more understanding than the wise Zakanim, this, said I, ought the more to strike terror into you. For if I disputed with any learning, and won over you wise and learned men, it would appear that I had acquired this power by long learning, and not by the favor of divine power. And now when, as I have said, we unskilled men convince and overcome you wise men, who that has any sense does not perceive that this is not a work of human refinement, but of divine will and gift. Chapter 63, Appeal to the Yahudaim. Thus we argued and bore witness, and we who were unlearned men and fishermen taught the Kohanim concerning the unified Yahweh of heaven, the Sadducees concerning the resurrection of the dead, the Shomronim concerning the sacredness of Yerushalayim, not that we entered into their cities, but disputed with them in public. The Sophrim and Prushim, concerning the Malkuth Shamayim, the Talmudim of Yochanan, that they should not allow Yochanan to be a stumbling block to them, and all the people, that Yeshua is the ageless Mashiach. At last, however, I warned them that before we should go forth to the Goyim to preach to them the knowledge of Yahweh the Father, that they should themselves be reconciled to Yahweh, receiving his Son, for I showed them that in no way else could they be saved, unless through the favor of the Ruach HaKodesh they hasted to be washed with the mikvah in Yahshua's name, and receive the Ruach HaKodesh of Yahweh in his name, whom alone they ought to believe concerning those things that he taught, so they might merit to attain ageless salvation. But that otherwise it was utterly impossible for them to be reconciled to Yahweh, even if they should kindle 1,000 altars and 1,000 high altars to him. Chapter 64. Temple to be destroyed. For we, said I, have ascertained beyond doubt that Yahweh is much rather displeased with the Zebaim that you offer, the time of Zebaim having now passed away. And because you will not acknowledge that the time for offering victims is now past, therefore the Hekel will be destroyed, and the abomination of desolation will stand in the devoted place, and then the Besor will be preached to the Goyim for a testimony against you, that your unbelief may be judged by their faith. For the whole world at different times suffers under diverse maladies, either spreading generally over all or affecting specifically. Therefore, it needs a physician to visit it for its salvation. We therefore bear witness to you and declare to you what has been hidden from every one of you. It is for you to consider what is for your advantage. Chapter 65. Tumult stilled by Gamaliel. When I had thus spoken, the whole multitude of the Kohanim was in a rage, because I had foretold to them the overthrow of the Hekel. Because Gamaliel, who was secretly our brother in the faith, but by our advice remained among us, saw that they were greatly enraged and moved with intense fury against us. He stood up and said, Be quiet for a little, O men of Israel, for you do not perceive the trial that hangs over you. So refrain from these men, and if what they are engaged in be of human counsel, it will soon come to an end. But if it be from Yahweh, why will you sin without cause and prevail nothing? For who can overpower the will of Yahweh? Now therefore, since the day is declining toward evening, I will myself dispute with these men tomorrow, in this same place, in your hearing, so that I may openly oppose and clearly confute every error. By this speech of his, their fury was to some extent checked, especially in the hope that next day we should be publicly convicted of error, and so he dismissed the people peacefully. Chapter 66. Discussion resumed. Now when we had come to our Yaakov, while we detailed to him all that had been said and done, we supped and remained with him, spending the whole night in supplication to Almighty Yahweh, that the discourse of the approaching disputation might show the unquestionable truth of our faith. Therefore, on the following day, Yaakov the Mevaker went up to the Hekel with us, and with the whole Kahal. There we found a great multitude, which had been waiting for us from the middle of the night. Therefore we took our stand in the same place as before, in order that, standing on an elevation, we might be seen by all the people. Then, when profound silence was obtained, Gamaliel, who, as we have said, was of our faith, but who by dispensation remained amongst them, that if any time they should attempt anything unjust or immoral against us, he might either check them by skillfully adopted counsel, or might warn us, that we might either be on our guard or might turn it aside. He therefore, as if acting against us, first of all, looking to Yaakov the Mevaker, addressed him in this manner. Chapter 67. The speech of Gamaliel. If I, Gamaliel, deem it no reproach either to my learning or to my old age to learn something from babes and unlearned ones, if there be anything that is profitable for me safely to acquire. For he who lives reasonably knows that nothing is more precious than the Ruach. Ought not this to be the object of love and desire to all? To learn what they do not know, and to teach what they have learned. For it is most certain that neither friendship, nor kindred, nor lofty power ought to be more precious to men than truth. Therefore you, O brothers, if you know anything more, shrink not from laying it before the people of Yahweh who are present, and also before your brothers, while the whole people will willingly and in perfect quietness hear what you say. For why should not the people do this, when they see even me equally with themselves willing to learn from you, if Yahweh has revealed something further to you? But if you in anything are deficient, do not be ashamed in like manner to be taught by us, that Yahweh may fill up whatever is wanting on either side. But if any fear now agitates you on account of some of our people whose minds are prejudiced against you, and if through fear of their violence you dare not speak openly your sentiments, in order that I may deliver you from this fear, I openly swear to you by Almighty Yahweh who lives forever, that I will allow no one to lay hands upon you. Since then you have all this people witnessing of this oath of mine, and you hold the covenant of our oath as a fitting pledge, let each of us, you, without hesitation, declare what he has learned, and let us, brothers, listen eagerly and in silence. Chapter 68. The Rule of Faith. Now these sayings of Gamaliel did not much please Caiaphas, and holding him in suspicion, as it seemed, he began to insinuate himself cunningly into the discussions. For, smiling at what Gamaliel had said, the chief of the Kohanim asked of Yaakov, the chief Mevaker, that the discourse concerning Mashiach should not be drawn but from the Scriptures, that we may know, said he, whether Yahshua be the very Moshiach or no. Then said Yaakov, we must first inquire from what Scriptures we are to especially derive our discussion. Then he, with difficulty, at length overcome by reason, answered that it must be derived from Torah, and afterwards he made mention also of the Navaim. Chapter 69. Two Comings of Moshiach. To him our Yaakov began to show that whatsoever things the Naviim say they have taken from Torah, and what they have spoken is in accordance with Torah. He also made some statements respecting the scrolls of the kings, in what way, and when, and by whom they were written, and how they ought to be used. And when he had discussed most fully concerning Torah, and had, by a most clear exposition, brought into light whatever things are in it concerning Moshiach, he showed by most abundant proofs that Yahshua is the Moshiach, and that in him are fulfilled all the prophecies that related to his humble coming. For he showed that two comings of him are foretold, one in humiliation, which he has accomplished, the other in glory, which is hoped for to be accomplished, when he will come to give the Malkuth to those who believe in him, and who observe all things that he has commanded. And when he had plainly taught the people concerning these things, he added this also, that unless a man be immersed in water in the name of Yeshua, as Yeshua taught, he can neither receive remission of sins nor enter into the Malkuth Shamayim, and he declared that this is the prescription of the unbegotten Elohim. To which he added this also, do not think that we speak of two unbegotten Elohim, or that one is divided into two, or that the same is made male and female, but we speak of the only begotten Son of Yahweh, not sprung from another source, but born from Yahweh's bosom. And in like manner we speak of the Ruach. And when he had spoken some things also concerning mikvah, through 7 successive days he persuaded all the people and the Kohen Hagadol that they should hasten straightway to receive mikvah. Chapter 70. the tumult raised by Shaul. And when matters were at the point that they should come and be immersed, some one of our enemies, entering the Hekel with a few men, began to cry out and say,
What mean you, O men of Israel? Why are you so easily hurried on? Why are you led headlong by most miserable men who are deceived by Shimon, a magician?
While he was thus speaking and adding more to the same effect, Yaakov the Mevaker was refuting him. He began to excite the people and to raise a tumult, so that the people might not be able to hear what was said. Therefore, he began to drive all into confusion with shouting, and to undo what had been arranged with much labor, and at the same time to reproach the Kohanim, and to enrage them with revilings and abuse, and like a madman, to excite everyone to murder, saying,
What do you? Why do you hesitate, O sluggish and inert? Why do we not lay hands upon them and pull all these fellows to pieces?
And when he had said this, he first, seizing a strong brand from the altar, set the example of smiting. Then others also, seeing him, were carried away with like readiness. Then ensued a tumult on either side of the beating and the beaten. Much blood is shed. There is a confused flight, in the midst of which the enemy attacked Yaakov and threw him headlong from the top of the steps. And supposing him to be dead, he cared not to inflict further violence upon him. This attempt on James' life is found in historical and traditional material that didn't make the Bible. I wonder why. Did you guess who my enemy was? In this next section, we're leading up to the first debate between Shimon HaMag, that is Simon Magus, and Kefa, and the preparations the disciples are taking in order to counter the false teachings of this Gnostic who believes that he is the Most High God. There actually was a monument in Rome to Simon Magus as the Most High God. And who's to say if that monument in the Areopagus to the unknown God wasn't also a monument or shrine to Simon Magus? If you like this book, I'm going to give away 10 of them. That's all I can afford to do. And at the end of this recording, Brother Shroomkopf will give you a special word that will tell me that you listened to the whole thing. So you get that special word and contact me with it at www.yahad.me. Otherwise, if you want to support my ministry, and I hope you will because it's Yahweh's ministry, you can purchase one of my books, including the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, at kingdomcart.com. That's kingdomcart, kingdom, KART.com. There you'll find my other translations, the Nazarene Acts in ebook form, and also in this new audio form. Now let's get back to the story. We only have a little time left on this show. Chapter 13, Shimon HaMag, Secret of His Magic.
Now, when Niketa and I once asked him to explain to us how these things could be affected by magic art, and what was the nature of it, Shimon began thus to explain it to us as his associates. I have, said he, made the spirit of a boy, pure and violently slain, and invoked by unthinkable commands to assist me, and by it all is done that I command. But, said I, is it possible for the spirit of man to do these things? He answered, I would have you know this, that the spirit of man holds the next place after the Elohim when once it is set free from the darkness of his body, and immediately it acquires insight, so it is invoked for necromancy. Then I answered, Why then do not the spirits of persons who are slain take vengeance on their slayers? Do you not remember, said he, that I told you that when it goes out of the body it acquires knowledge of the future? Oh, I remember, said I. Well then, said he, As soon as it goes out of the body, it immediately knows that there is a judgment to come, and that everyone will suffer punishment for those evil that he has done, and therefore they are unwilling to take vengeance on their slayers, because they themselves are enduring torments for their own evil deeds that they had done here, and they know that severer punishments await them in the judgment. Moreover, they are not permitted by the Malachim who preside over them to go out or to do anything. Then I replied, if the Malachim do not permit them to come hither, or to do what they please, how can the spirits obey the magician who invokes them? It is not, said he, that they grant indulgence to the spirits that are willing to come, but when the presiding Malachim are adjured by one greater than themselves, they have the excuse of our violence who adjure them, to permit the spirits that we invoke to go out. For they do not sin who suffer violence, but we who impose necessity upon them. Thereupon Niceta, not able longer to refrain, hastily answered, as indeed I also was about to do, only I wish first to get the information from him on several points. But, as I said, Niceta, anticipating me, said, And do you not fear the day of judgment, who do violence to Malachim, and invoke spirits, and deceive men, and bargain for divine honor to yourselves from them? And how do you persuade us that there will be no judgment, as some of the Yehudaim profess, and that spirits are not immortal, as many suppose, though you see them with your very eyes, and receive from them assurances of the divine judgment?
Chapter 14. Shimon Hamag professes to be Elohim.
At those sayings of his, Shimon grew pale, but after a while, recollecting himself, he thus answered, Do not think that I am a man of your race. I am neither magician, nor lover of Luna, nor son of Antonius. For before my mother Rachel and he came together, she, still a virgin, conceived me, while it was in my power to be either small or great, and to appear as a man among men. Therefore I have chosen you first as my Havarim, for the purpose of trying you, that I might place you first in my heavenly and unspeakable places when I will have proved you. Therefore I have pretended to be a man, so that I might be more clearly ascertain if you cherish entire affection toward me. But when I heard that, judging him indeed to be a wretch, yet wondering at his impudence, and blushing for him, and at the same time fearing lest he should attempt some evil against us, I beckoned to Niceta to feign for a little while along with me, and said to him, Be not angry with us, corruptible men, O you incorruptible Elohim, but rather accept our affection, and our mind willing to know who Elohim is, for we did not till now know who you are, nor did we perceive that you are he whom we were seeking.
Chapter 15. Shimon Hamag professed to have made a boy of air.
As we spoke these and such like words with looks suited to the occasion, this most vain fellow believed that we were deceived, and being thereby the more elated, he added also this, I will now be encouraging to you for the affection that you bear towards me as Elohim, for you loved me while you did not know me, and were seeking me in ignorance. But I would not have you doubt that this is truly to be El, when one is able to become small or great as he pleases. For I am able to appear to man in whatever manner I please. Now then, I will begin to unfold to you what is true. Once on a time, I, by my power, turned air into water, and water again into blood, and solidifying it into flesh, formed the new human creature, a boy, and produced a much nobler work than Yahweh the Creator. For he created a man from the earth, but I from air, a far more difficult matter. And again I unmade him and restored him to air, but not until I had placed his picture and image in my bedroom as a proof and memorial of my work. Then we understood that he spoke concerning that boy whose spirit, after he had been slain by violence, he made use of for those services that he required.
Chapter 16. Shimon Hamag, hopelessness of his case. But Kefa, hearing these things, said with tears, "Greatly do I wonder at the infinite patience of Yahweh, and on the other hand, all the audacity of human rashness in some. For what further reason can be found to persuade Shimon that Yahweh judges the unrighteous, since he persuades himself that he employs the obedience of inner beings for the service of his crimes? But in truth, he is deluded by demons. Yet although he is sure by these very things that spirits are immortal and are judged for the deeds they've done, and although he thinks that he really sees those things, the things that we believe by faith, though, as I said, he is deluded by demons, yet he thinks that he sees the very substance of the Spirit. How will such a man, I say, be brought to confess either that he acts immorally while he occupies such an evil position, or that he is to be judged for those things that he has done, who, knowing the judgment of Yahweh, despises it, and shows himself an enemy to Yahweh, and dares commit such horrid things? So it is certain, my brothers, that some oppose the truth and obedience to Yahweh, not because it appears to them that reason can by no means stand with faith, but because they are either involved in excess of immorality, or prevented by their own evils, or elated by the swelling of their heart, so that they do not even believe those things that they think that they see with their own eyes. Chapter 17. Men enemies of Yahweh. But inasmuch as an inborn affection towards Yahweh the Creator seemed to suffice for salvation to those who loved him, the enemy studies to pervert this affection in men and to render them hostile and ungrateful to their Creator. For I call heaven and earth to witness that if Yahweh permitted the enemy to rage as much as he desires, all men should have perished long ere now. But for his mercy's sake, Yahweh does not suffer him. But if men would turn their affections toward Yahweh, all would doubtless be saved, even if for some faults they might seem to be corrected for righteousness. But now most men have made enemies of Yahweh, whose hearts the immoral one has entered, and has turned aside toward himself the affection that Yahweh the Creator had implanted in them, that they might have it toward him. But of the rest, who seem for a time to be watchful, the enemy, appearing in a vision of kavod and splendor, and promising them certain great and mighty things, has caused their mind and heart to wander away from Yahweh. Yet it is for some just reason that he's permitted to accomplish these things. Chapter 18. Responsibility of Men. To this Aquila answered,
How then are men of faith, if the immoral one, transforming himself into the brightness of light, promises to men greater things than the Creator himself does?
Then Kefa answered, I think, says he, that nothing is more unjust than this. And now listen while I tell you how unjust it is. If your son, whom you have trained and nourished with all care and brought to man's estate, should be ungrateful to you, and should leave you and go to another, whom perhaps he may have seen to be richer, and should show to him the honor that he owed to you, and through hope of a greater profit should deny his birth, and refuse you your paternal rights, would this seem to you right or immoral? Then Aquila answered,
It is manifest to all that it would be immoral.
Then Kefa said, If you say that this would be immoral among men, how much more so it is in the case of Yahweh, who, above all men, is worthy of honor from men, whose benefits we not only enjoy, but by whose means and power it is that we begin to be when we were not, and whom, if we please, we will obtain from him to be forever in blessedness. In order, therefore, that the unfaithful may be distinguished from the faithful, and the obedient from the disobedient, It has been permitted to the immoral one to use those arts by which the affections of every one towards the true Father may be proved. But if there were in truth some strange Elohim, were it right to leave our own Elohim, who created us, and who is our Father and our Maker, and to pass over to another?
Oh, Yahweh forbid,
Said Aquila.
Oh, but we hate to end it there, but we must. Time is up. If you've been listening for the secret word, that secret word is standing. Go to www.yahad.me, fill out form, include the word standing, and you shall receive this audiobook free of charge. Hurry up, there's only 10, and I wish you a very Nazarene night.